Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this particular video, I'm going to be looking at the solar eclipse in Virgo on the 21st of September, and I'm also going to take a brief look at the Libra ingress, which happens the following day. And the two things coming at the same time are quite interesting, really, because with an ingress chart, we're looking at the next 3 months, and the idea that it's happening in the wake of a solar eclipse certainly says that this quarter, in terms of the world, really, because every country shares the time the ingress happens, it's always in the wake of the solar eclipse. So it's going to be a pretty packed autumn for the globe, for the whole globe. Other things I want to say about this solar eclipse, which happens on the 21st of September, is part of a pair. We had a total lunar eclipse on the 7th of September, and so this is its mate. And I'm actually recording this before the total lunar eclipse. I'm recording it on the 2nd of September, so I can't kind of talk about the events that either happened on the day or around that point. But we'll bear in mind that often eclipses have something to do with each other. They're like little bookends. And of course, when we look at new moon, full moon, and we think about the new moon in Pisces, and then the total lunar eclipse in Pisces, the 6-month period, they're two bookends, then events are often connected personally in your life, or they may be connected when we look at the bigger picture, the mundane picture, the global picture, which I like to do at the start of almost all my videos. Now, I do get wrapped on the knuckles sometimes because I talk politically, but I'm certainly not trying to be biased here, but I'm fascinated by global politics, and I like to look at the astrology in connection with that, and I know a lot of you enjoy that too. So I am going to be talking about things that I think are pretty significant related to this solar eclipse. Now, solar eclipses are really dramatic, especially when they're total solar eclipses. Then the sun gets completely obliterated by the moon, or rather the moon's shadow. So this isn't one of those. It isn't a total solar eclipse. It's a partial solar eclipse, but it can still be a fascinating event to watch. And if you're in the South Pacific, you're in the Antarctica, yeah, and then we move over to New Zealand, you will be able to see the solar eclipse, and it will look as though a large part of the sun is in shadow, and there'll just be a small half moon shape showing you it's not a total lunar eclipse, it's a partial lunar eclipse, but it can still be very, very interesting. And in fact, this is quite a deep solar eclipse, so quite a lot of the sun is going to be blocked out when you see the whole thing. I don't think that necessarily has anything to do with the interpretation of what it may mean. I think an eclipse is an eclipse and is an eclipse, and that's the thing we need to look at. And all eclipses, in terms of the astrology of an eclipse, are about game-changing events, things that are jaw-dropping. And of course, they can happen in your own life, and we can mark our own, when we look back through our lives and see where the eclipses were at the time. We did some really important things. Maybe we got some very important job. We had our babies, we got married. These are very typical kind of life events. Quite interesting to look at the eclipse that was nearest the date you did all those things, because it's part of your life story, and eclipses are part of the human story as well as they are of us individually. What is also interesting about this solar eclipse is that it takes place at 29 degrees and 5 minutes of Virgo. So it's right at the very, very end of Virgo, almost into Libra. And of course, within hours, the Libra ingress takes place. The sun enters Libra. But that 29 degrees of a sign, 0 degrees of a sign. The 29th degree is called the anaretic degree. And that's really interesting. It's like a kind of power degree. And if you have planets at maybe late 28, 29, certainly 0, even up to 1 degree of any particular sign, then that planet or point, ascendant, descendant, whatever it may be, is on the anaretic degree. And that means it's extraordinarily powerful in some way. So to have an eclipse on the anaretic degree says, wow, this eclipse packs a powerful punch. And I'm going to get into that, have a look at, what I think are the most likely, well, I'm going to be speculating a little bit, but also trying to be kind of rational about it too. I don't give the sign too much attention. I mean, obviously, if you're a Virgo and you've got an eclipse in your sign, you're going to pay a little bit more attention to it. But I think the quality of the eclipse in terms of what do we know about the sign of Virgo, I can't get into the idea that the solar eclipse has something to do with the engine of the world, so to speak, in mundane terms, or to do with the engine of your life if it falls in something somewhere in your natal chart, bang on. And you need to have something in between 29 to 0 degrees to have that happen. If it's just loosely around in your chart, it's a background effect and may not have any particular noticeable event attached to it. And of course, then we have the whole thing with the timing of an eclipse. I mean, we always feel very justified as astrologers when some mega event happens on an eclipse. Take, for instance, the coronation of King Charles. That took place within hours of a lunar eclipse. And that is the sort of event that we want to look at. And I think, looking at King Charles and the fact that his coronation was marked by a lunar eclipse, then we're always going to be looking at eclipses in his reign as showing us very important periods when very important things happen. So I'll mention that perhaps a little nearer when we come to speculation and see with what we may be looking at as regards the monarchy. What else do I want to say? I just want to make sure that I've got everything on here that I want to talk about. Yes. So what I want to do, without further ado, is to have a look at what the eclipse looks like. And here is the chart of the eclipse. And as you can see here, I've set it from the perspective of Washington. And the reason I've done that is because the solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo and 5 minutes is on the USA's midheaven. So this eclipse has got something really important to do with the government, to do with the president, and to do with the life of Americans. And I'll come on to that shortly. Let me take you around the chart here, show you what's very interesting. You'll probably see that there's a red kind of triangle kite-looking thing in the center of the horoscope, and you'd be right, it is a kite configuration. The sun and moon are opposed to Saturn and Neptune, and Saturn and Neptune are zinging, resonating with Pluto and Uranus, and in turn are trining, both of them, the solar eclipse. Now, on the right, you'll also see I've drawn in 2 other configurations. These are called yods, or finger of God, finger of fate. It's the same configuration, but different names. And that's going on as well. On one, we have Saturn and Neptune as the focus of a yod involving Mars and Venus. And in the other one, we have Mars at the focal point of this, of a sextile, if you like, between Saturn and Neptune and Uranus. So we I'm just trying to look at that, make sure that was working all right. Yes, it is. Yes, it's funny. Sometimes I look at it again and I think, did I get that right? It's complicated when you start joining up all these planets. And as you know, when I've been talking on my videos recently. There've been all these configurations, a lot of them centering on August, a very, very significant month politically, and often, and you may too have had very significant events taking place in August as well. And that's because so many planets were aligned. And when you get that, you get everything resonating at a similar pitch. And it means, you know, big events happen. This is something going on here is spectacular. So we have this configuration in our solar eclipse, and you know, it's worthy of note. And we can see these other smaller configurations that also have to do with the fact that this is a time when humanity is going through a very trying passage, but actually the going through of this passage, which may be painful, difficult, tragic, dreadful, once we get through the other side of it, we're in a new place. And it is going to take some time. And of course, this ties in, if you like, with the age of Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius, all of that. And it's going to take a long time for us to get to this new place. And part of this journey is all to do with the amazing breakthroughs we're making in terms of humanity, all the developments with artificial intelligence, every bit as much as the terrible times we're going through with war and devastation. It's all part of the same mix that's going to take us into a new place. And again, we're looking at this solar eclipse, and this is also portending events that have that quality to either show us just how much of an advance we're making as humanity, but also what devastation we are living through, what turmoil we are living through. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, by the side of the horoscope, you'll see that I put some dates and some configuration and some hieroglyphs there, which are the hieroglyphs of the planets. So these just give you a kind of picture of the lead up to the solar eclipse on the 21st. Now, on the 7th of September, we had the total lunar eclipse. That's behind us. That will all have happened by the time you're seeing me here on this screen. However, in terms of myself, when I'm recording this on the 2nd of September, it hasn't happened yet. So there are a lot of things to, you know, come about as we, you know, go forward with this. And I want to mention something about earthquakes here. As you know, I'm quite interested in earthquakes and volcanoes. I've written a big piece on them, and you know, when we're looking at the most recent period through from July through to this time, there have been some very important seismic episodes. We had an earthquake at 8.8 on the Richter scale. I mean, that's massive. That was earlier in July. And then on the 31st of August, there was another powerful earthquake in Afghanistan, not measuring 7, 8, or 9, but enough because it was near the surface and in very mountainous territory, caused huge devastation. And that was a matter of days before the total lunar eclipse. And what I found interesting about that, and it comes back to the idea of, I suppose, 28, 29 degrees, 0, that whole area of the circle, that in my research into earthquakes, I find often 28 degrees of Gemini, Sagittarius, is prominent for some reason. In the one in July, which took place in Alaska, Venus was 28 degrees of Gemini. And at the moment the Earth heaved in Afghanistan, what was rising was 28 degrees of Gemini. So Gemini Sagittarius on the ascendant-descendant axis. So there is something going on here, which I find quite interesting. And again, I'm relating it to that sensitive area. And if we look at our chart here, and we look at the 7 o'clock point, we'll see that Saturn is at 28 degrees of Pisces. 28 is up close and personal to Neptune and opposing the solar eclipse. So, I mean, this says to me that we can't rule out more seismic episodes. In fact, I would say that's the effect of this solar eclipse, whether we're talking in terms of Earth movements and landslips, weather-related events that change the shape of the land, or whether we're talking metaphorically and we're talking about events that change the shape of governments and leaders. It's a good word, seismic. And as I said a little bit earlier, you know, if there was a single word we could put to this, it would be seismic. So if we look a little bit further back to the left-hand side of my chart here, 17th of September, 18th of September, Mercury, the planet of communication, is opposing the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So Mercury is about communication. It's about movement. So we know here that the affairs of man are moving fast, but also connecting to Saturn and Neptune. There is a sense here of things not being very clear, of things being very muddled. Maybe it's deceiving what we're looking at. Maybe there are rumors. Maybe there are events we don't understand. Maybe we're battling the elements. That's one thing we might look at when we have a Mercury-Saturn, Mercury-Neptune opposition. And if you look at your chart and you know at the moment that Saturn and Neptune are angling something in your chart, you might feel as though you've got a touch of brain fog, like you just can't gather your thoughts. You're normally able to think through things quickly, make decisions, and everything seems handleable. Well, when you've got this Neptune-Saturn combination affecting your chart, it's almost as though either you're seeing too many things. You know, we can't see the wood for the trees. That's very much the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. There are just so many angles to something. There are so many feelings we might have about something that it is quite difficult to really get our bearings with it. And then we put that out on the global scale, and we can see that there are a lot of things going on that people are grappling with. Our leaders, our governments are trying to grapple with these incredible, complicated situations, and really sort of feeling that they can't make a right decision. Well, that can't go right for going wrong is a good way of looking at it. I think here, when we think about Great Britain and its, you know, all the migrants who are crossing into England, we have this colossal number of immigrants, and trying to figure out where to put them, how to treat them with empathy, compassion, and be open to our fellow humans who are suffering. It's now causing incredible problems in Great Britain. And, you know, no government seems to be able to find the right decision. And I think, you know, we're looking at that dilemma really in that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And of course, it's going to come right to the forefront by the time we've got a solar eclipse there. And I think poor old Britain, we're going to go through some real kind of public demonstrations of lack of faith in the government and upset about what's going on. It'll reach a pitch at that point. And I suppose, in a way, that if politicians had astrologers guiding them, they might think, right, this is really going to, the proverbial is going to hit the fan towards the end of September. I might really need to say something very profound so that we can work our way gracefully through this bit of a crisis. It's going to be a crisis worldwide. It isn't just for Great Britain. But, you know, anyway, I'm taking you through these days and building up a picture here for you personally and for the general collective view. On the 19th of September, Venus moves into Virgo. And whenever Venus comes into your sign, it's marking a kind of 4-week period when things really are, there are great opportunities. There's the Venus factor is strong in your life. There are things to do with love, to do with finance, to do with balance in your life. to do with the pleasures of life, to do with finding, I suppose, the good things, the best things about life. And that certainly applies for Virgo with Venus going through the sign. But let's not forget, Venus will be in the opposite sign for Pisceans, so it'll be going through the area of relationships. So relationships are going to be a big issue for Pisceans from that period, 19th of September through to about the, mid-October, let's put it that way. Of course, because Uranus is at the very early degree, 1 degree Gemini, and 22 minutes, the minute Venus gets into Virgo, it squares Uranus. So there are some upsets here, some romantic upsets, some financial upsets. And certainly when I looked briefly at the Libra ingress, there's a lot of financial instability. And I think perhaps around this point, which is just before the solar eclipse, we are going to see some terrific financial ups and downs. The markets are going to go kind of crazy. And I think especially so in America, because I do think the whole thing with the tariffs, which really only came into being in early August, people think they happened in April, but they didn't really get rolling until August. And I think we're seeing the effects of that probably quite negatively by the time we get to the 21st of September. So quite a lot of economic change we're looking at this solar eclipse for, and maybe too, of course, that affects us individually as well. So as we come to the 21st of September itself, the sun will have reached the opposite point to Saturn, and then, of course, hours later, the moon joins it. So we have the solar eclipse opposing Saturn. Now, Sun-Saturn oppositions aren't a lot of fun. Now, it's interesting. I hear myself saying it, and then a little voice in my head says, oh, wait a minute. And the wait a minute that came in then is just the idea that Saturn improves with age. I'm working a lot with this recently, in that when you start out life, Saturnian experiences are really, really hard work. And they sort of make us realize we have responsibilities, whether it's to ourselves or to other people. And sometimes that gets in the way of enjoying our life and feeling that we're, making progress and lots of good things to look forward to. Saturn comes along and says, no, tears before bedtime. And but as you get older, and certainly by the time of the second Saturn return, which is about 58, 59 years of age, starting that third chapter of life, you should be wearing your Saturn well. And I certainly think with the sign of Capricorn, life improves with age for Capricorn. And if you're a strongly Saturnian type, you've got Saturn rising, you've got the sun conjunct Saturn, you've got Saturn on your midheaven, then as you get older, you appreciate those lessons that you've learned. You handle Saturn and you get gravitas, that sense of really coming into yourself and all your years of experience being now something that you wear with pride and come to handle well. So Sun-Saturn opposition is not what we astrologers get into our cheerleading outfits and start turning somersaults about. No, not at all. It means it's serious business. We have some serious things going on at this time for the world. And of course, Saturn is with Neptune. And we come back to that good old theme of end of regimes, the beginnings of new ones. They don't start instantly. There's often a gap. And I often point to this when we think about the Berlin Wall, which came down in 1989. It wasn't until 1991, 2 years later, that the Soviet Union collapsed, and we had all these countries that were once under the umbrella of the Soviet Union now becoming independent, like Ukraine, which is why it's very interesting that at this point in time, the whole war with Ukraine is at an incredibly important pitch, because we're thinking about the end of regimes, the beginning of new ones, and we're on a precipice as to whether Ukraine will hold on to its sovereignty or be swept up again in the big arms of the Russian bear. I have to say that my feeling is that Russia will collapse before then. And whatever happens, will unravel. And I guess part of the story is going to be related to this solar eclipse. We may get to feel we know a little bit more about what's going on in the Ukrainian war. Now, just a word about Sun-Neptune. We need to look at these two planets together, which I've just done. But when we put the Sun and Neptune together, we get this divine energy, so to speak, and it's beautiful. We can be 10 foot off the ground with Neptune. It's like, oh, this is fabulous. But at the same time, you're not really focused on anything, and lots of things are slipping by unnoticed. But it's a great feeling, and we get our great inspiration, our ability to be selfless. This is all in Neptune's story. So there are some good things about the Sun-Neptune opposition, but there's also some bad things. And that's really, we don't see the treachery taking place. We don't necessarily see what's really going on. And in fact, eclipses are like that. The solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse, there's always something in shadow. So we don't see what it's hiding. There's something hidden within this. And that's why we may be baffled by events in our own life and baffled by events taking place in the world at this time. So before I actually leave this chart, I want to point to another pair of planets that's very interesting. And as you can see, if you look down the list here, on the 24th of September, Mars squares Pluto. Mars will be in Scorpio by that time, squaring Pluto in Aquarius. And Mars-Pluto influences are really, really powerful. We were under a very, very strong Mars-Pluto influence from November of 2024 right through on and off to April of this year. And so a lot of things, again, let's go back to America again and think about what was happening around the 5th of November and the incoming new president. And we know really from the beginning of the administration what a roller coaster ride it's been, as government offices, government departments are shredded and heads have come tumbling down. There have been all sorts of upsets with the decisions of the administration, whether it comes to the National Guard going into Los Angeles, Chicago, and also, again, like Great Britain, there's immigration issues. How do you deal with just so many people, taking up space in your nation? How do you deal with that compassionately, but at the same time, without, getting in over your head financially? And all the health things about that issue. And I'm not taking sides here, I'm just putting it out and saying why it is complicated. So to come back to the Mars-Pluto square reasserting itself, of course, right since the beginning of September, the end of August, really, Mars has been applying to Pluto. It's just exact on the 24th. And that's a really aggressive, powerful, it's a push, come to shove kind of feeling with that aspect. So again, looking at it in terms of what's happening in your individual lives, just that statement, push comes to shove, can be very helpful, because it's like, yeah, that's the point. I know what's going on now. I've got to do something about it. But of course, that then translates, when we look at mundane astrology in the world, to exactly the same thing. Push comes to shove. There are going to be some mighty decisions made around the time of the solar eclipse, and of course also on the lunar eclipse. So a couple of things I want to say before I get into looking at it sign by sign. And that is what was interesting to me about the solar eclipse being on the midheaven of the chart of the USA. So we're looking at certainly a new chapter for the administration and a new chapter for its president, who is President Trump. Now, if we just leave that blank, it allows events to fill in the blank that we've created. We haven't made a prediction as to what that may be, but we can play with a lot of possibilities around this time. And we can certainly see, again, let me remind you, I'm recording this on the 2nd of September, and President Trump has been missing in a way, hasn't done any public kind of press conferences for a few days. His posts on Truth Social haven't been his posts, they're clearly been written by someone else. And his demeanor, when we have seen him, looks sad, and he doesn't look his best. So the rumors are circulating that he may have a really serious health problem. I don't know that, certainly not at this stage, although maybe by now we do. But if that is the case, then we have to look at the idea of a president who is, 79 years of age, almost into his 80s, and he's handling a job that a 50-year-old would find hard going. So the pressures of office, I think, have to get to anyone. And this may play into this solar eclipse. We might have a clearer idea of how the future looks for the Trump administration. I would say, and I have said in my Friday Bites, that it wouldn't surprise me at all if by February of next year, which is when the next solar eclipse takes place, and that solar eclipse is at 28 degrees of Aquarius, which happens to be the moon of the USA. I think between September and February of next year, these two eclipses, we probably will discover that President Trump is not going to stay the full course of the presidency for one reason or the other. And I'm not going to get into speculation about that because I'm just simply not. But these eclipses tell the story. Remember, President Trump was born on an eclipse, therefore eclipses are important. They're an important part of the narrative of his life. So something very, very important is going on around the time of this eclipse in connection with his job, which of course is president, and his future, his life generally. So we're definitely going to see something there. Now, a little bit earlier, I mentioned King Charles, who was crowned on a lunar eclipse. And so here we have another solar eclipse. Now, here too, we have a man, a leader, who is suffering. He has terminal cancer. Now, he's doing very well. He's done a remarkable job since he was crowned in 2023. And there is no reason to suppose that his life is to be cut short any day soon. However, we want to look at the idea that this particular solar eclipse does fall on the moon in the Great Britain chart, which is to do with Great Britain. And of course, Charles is the King of Great Britain. So we can expect some important announcements around the time of the solar eclipse, whether they're to do with the restructuring of the monarchy, with the monarchy doing all sorts of things, or whether indeed it is along the lines of something a little bit more dramatic. And we're looking again at some announcement about the future, and perhaps that being something that would have reverberations through Great Britain, if not the rest of the world, because that would be something that would make us all feel, oh, wow, that's the end of a regime somehow. But we're not there yet, and I'm speculating. And this is what we do with astrology. We look at the alignments coming up, and we think, where have we seen this before? What period of history, what historical events happened on a similar kind of pattern? And therefore, we make judgments accordingly because that's happened before. But here's the most important thing. We have free will. We make decisions, and we know we do that because we make decisions every day. So the decisions we make, whether we're ordinary people like you and me, or whether we're kings and presidents, there are decisions to be made with governments. And when we see a certain set of circumstances that are the signature of the eclipse is on them, so they're going to be exceptional circumstances, the decisions we make in the wake of them changes accordingly, changes the shape of what might have been subtly. So bear that in mind. And I think when I was talking about the total lunar eclipse and saying, just it's okay, I'm going to be flying on the total lunar eclipse. So if I can fly, a kind of scary thing to a lot of people, especially this year, there have been so many flying upsets, let's put it that way. But, you know, we have to live our life accordingly. We make decisions, and that's what we do. We have the choice. I could have said, no, I'm not flying on that day. But I thought, no, you know what? It's the best time to go, going to go. So we make decisions, even though we may know the astrology or what's going on in the astrology. And that's the really important thing. We're both accepting the idea that we have a destiny. There are certain things that are bound to happen in our lives, and we must meet them at some point. But at the same time, our decisions make a difference. And the more we evolve, the more we grow in life, then when we come to events that are complex, sometimes upsetting, overwhelming, we have more consciousness in order to make better decisions. And I think that's a really, really important thing to talk about. So anyway, I'm in danger of waffling. I'm not careful. And I haven't done anything about the Ingress chart. But what I want to say about the Ingress chart, and I did mention something about finances, that I think when I looked at all the Ingress charts, that finances was part of that mix. And I do think that, generally speaking, that the next quarter is going to be crucial for finances, and I'm not looking at it favorably. I think it's going to be rocky. And I also think because of the Mars-Pluto square that's in the Ingress chart, we're not going to see the end of wars. In fact, there is probably more likely to be an escalation. And I certainly think in terms of people protesting, and you've got to remember all the countries in the world, if we look at all of them, people are protesting about this, that, and the other. I think that too is going to be a very powerful theme of the quarter from through October, November, December, till we get to the winter the winter Ingress, the Capricorn Ingress, and a new one will start. I think it's going to be a season of protest and violence, I would say. That's not a very cheery thought, is it? But anyway, it is what it is. So let's get on with sign by sign. And for those of you who aren't used to, you're not used to watching me, you don't know how I work, I look at the event, whether it's a full moon, a new moon, an eclipse, a pattern, whatever it may be, from the perspective of the sun sign. So if you know you're a Pisces or you know you're a Scorpio, well, wait until Scorpio comes up. However, if you do know your rising sign, and more importantly, the degree of your rising sign, and you know exactly where a full moon, a new moon, and on this occasion, a solar eclipse is falling, then you'll know exactly which sign you need to be listening to. It works for both. And I think, you know, working as I have done as a sun sign astrologer, as well as a what we might call a classical astrologer for donkey's years, that there is a validity to sun sign astrology, and the sun itself being the center of the solar system with all the planets moving around it. The sun represents the center of our life, really. So it has a role to play in that sign, and how we would then look at it, an eclipse or whatever it may be from that perspective. But our ascendant sets the whole thing going. And so to look at it from the ascending sign makes it a little bit more personal and probably a little bit more accurate. So let's begin. And of course, we're going to begin with Virgo because the solar eclipse is taking place in your sign. 29 degrees and 5 minutes. So if it's on your birthday, if your birthday is the 20th, the 21st, or even the 22nd of September, then your year ahead is dominated by this particular pattern, which means it's going to be a year, an unparalleled year, all sorts of big events taking place between September of 2025 and September of 2026. Now, I've drawn in the kite configurations so that you can see Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto, and how that connects with the sun. And it's very interesting. Look how close the degrees are. Pluto at 120, 120, should be 120, I think. It looks like 129 there, but should be 120. And Uranus at 122, they're really aligned. Neptune, 48 degrees, Saturn, 28, nearly 29. We see how closely these outer planets are, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're really very, very closely aligned. And now the solar eclipse is intersecting it. This is really important stuff. So we look at the solar eclipse in your sign, and we think this is personal. This is something related to your personal life, who you are. And we see its connection to Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, and Saturn. This is the point where I would say destiny has arrived. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's on the day. We have to be a little bit more elastic with our timeline. But the events that are going on in this September-October period, and of course, if it's your birthday, then we're stretching it out for the whole year. They're going to shape your life in some way. We're going to leave it open as to whether those events are great and good and you're utterly, overwhelmed with happiness about it, or whether you feel it not at all. It's like fate has moved in mysterious ways and you appear to have lost something or to have been unsuccessful in something that you had hoped would be a great success story. But new moon is a new chapter. And whatever's happening towards this period of the year, it is about recognizing that some aspects of your life are over, and it's right that they should be over, because we can't go taking everything that we have in our lives along with us, because we'll have it'll be like one of those houses where people have been collecting things. They've got a clutter problem and you can't move. You're climbing over boxes to try to get to something. So it's good to shed things. And we've got Pluto and Uranus linked into this solar eclipse. So it becomes a time to examine what's toxic in your life. What are you still doing, or what people are you still in the lives of when you know full well that it's toxic, it's bad for you, you shouldn't have that person in your life, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, it's a bad habit, it's self-destructive, it's time-wasting, it's preventing you from being your true self, it's preventing you from living a full life. And this solar eclipse is all about saying, you know what, I have to take radical action if I'm going to save myself, and I'm going to open a new chapter in which I can go towards the things I know I'm meant to do, I know that I can achieve, and I'm going to look to find my happiness and success. And that means throwing out a whole lot of stuff in order to start over, and particularly so if it's your birthday at that particular time. There's a lot to look forward to, Virgo. And I think sometimes you're a sign that works from a behind the scenes position. You're not someone who likes the forefront of life. And as I say that, I'm aware there are a lot of actors and stage performers are Virgo, But in a way, they wear the mask. They're private people behind the mask. So all Virgos are private people behind the mask that you wear. And I think sometimes you need to be aware of the power of your own self, of, your own personality, and that sometimes you need to step up to the plate. And I guess that's what this solar eclipse is all about, stepping up to the plate. Libra, you can see from the chart that I've drawn here just how close that solar eclipse is to your sign. It's less than a minute away. It's that close. And if you do have anything at 29 degrees of the mutable signs, Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius, then my goodness, this eclipse is going to have a marked effect on you and what happens next. I'm not even going to get into the idea that's in the 12th house because it's so near the end of it. But let me talk about the 12th house in the sense that when we think about the eclipse, is about a new chapter, starting a new chapter. And what do we need to do when we start a new chapter? We need to tie up loose ends. We need to process things that need to be processed. I mean, whether we're doing that literally, as we do when we're going to sign up to something new, there are often documents and forms that need to be signed. So we think about all of that going on. But when we think in terms of our life and who we are, lots of things in our lives in the past have been difficult for us. And occasionally we felt we didn't handle something very well. Maybe we feel as a legacy we don't want. And it just is dragging around with us. We're dragging this sack with us. It needs to be dealt with. So although that process should have been happening over the past year, actually, certainly since January, when the nodal axis came into Pisces, this idea of processing difficult events in your past so that you are free of the shadow of them is implicit in this solar eclipse for you. And of course, very quickly, the sun moves into Libra, and you will be taking or opening a new chapter. We look at that Neptune-Saturn opposition, which is definitely affecting the September Librans. I've talked a lot about the end of a regime, and there may be regimes in your life. I mean, we have health regimes, don't we? We have daily regimes. We have how our life runs, if you like. And we have people with whom they form the pattern of our lives. So there's endings here. Whether you're going to leave a relationship behind, it's the end of a relationship, whether it's the end of a job, whether it's the end of where you've been living, where your life headquarters has been. We're looking at the end of a regime here. As I said in the earlier part of this video, Sun-Neptune oppositions, and those of you who are born in 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th of September will have Neptune opposing your Sun. It gives you brain fog. It's like you can't make decisions. And already, Libra, you're a sign that balances things out to the extent that you're sometimes unable to make a decision. So when Neptune is there, it's even harder. It seems as though it's almost impossible to choose the right way to go. Hopefully, you can wait it out, wait till you do feel able to make a decision, or when the decision feels it can be made. But what you don't want to do is do something just for the sake of doing it. Never do that. And ultimately, once Neptune has moved away from its opposition to your sun sign, you will feel as though you are in a new place. But this solar eclipse and the events around it will be part of the reason that you're moving and changing, opening a new chapter, moving to a new place. And one last thing I want to say about this, because technically it is in the 12th house, health could be important at this point. It's either a good time to begin a new health regime, or it may be a time when you are aware that something needs to be done about a health problem that you have. And in this area, technically the 12th house, we often seek to escape. And I think you need to examine really, what are your escapist tendencies? Where do you escape to? Sometimes an escape is a healthy thing. It gives you a chance to breathe and think, but sometimes it's unhealthy if we're escaping into the realms of unreality or, following an addiction. These are bad things. So these are all things that are coming up into consciousness around this time. But keep remembering, a new chapter will unfold in the wake of what is taking place now. Scorpio, if we look at where this solar eclipse is taking place, we're in the 11th house of the horoscope. It's almost in the 12th house. The very next day, the sun is going to move in there, but we can't be in two areas at once. We have to technically say, yes, this eclipse is happening in the 11th house. And this is all about collaborations. Now, if we just looked at the solar eclipse on its own, we might say, hey, there's a new collaboration that's about to start, or it is about a new collaboration that may have been formed earlier on this year, for instance. So there's something about this that is very fateful. You may feel that what's taking place feels like it's meant to happen. But it's also an opportunity to remake a collaboration. And when we do work with other people on a project, whether we're literally, it's what we're doing as a job, or whether we're working with other people who are friends, and maybe we're doing something of a social nature or something of a kind of altruistic nature, because this area of the horoscope has a lot to do with helping humanity and thinking about the planet and thinking about, are we wasting our resources, and how can we live better, live a better lifestyle more harmoniously? What can we do with our fellow humans and our fellow everything that's on our planet? How can we live more sustainably with it? That's all very 11th house stuff. So this may just become more noticeable to you at the time of the solar eclipse. On the other hand, there may be very clear events that say, I'm leading the wrong life. I got to totally turn my life around. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is opposed to this solar eclipse, is about the end of regime. So it's not just the end of a chapter, like, well, I've finished this project I've been working on and now I'm on to a new project. It's more than that. It's almost like, look, this is the way I've been living. This is the way I've looked at my world. This is all sorts of things that now I feel I have to change. And maybe even so, when we look at Neptune in the 6th house, which is the area of work, that work situations are changing, and whether we change our job and move to a new place, or we're doing different things within the job that we do, and we've got different colleagues who we're sharing the workspace with, it amounts to the end of a regime. This idea of collaboration, very important, because when we work as a team, we are more successful. And I say this to a lot of my clients who are having a really tricky time in their relationship, their romantic relationship, their marriage. I say to them, look, you're on the same team. Just think of that. So think about the goal that you've set yourself as a team. Therefore, both of you are working for the good of the team. It is less about you as a person, more about the sake of the team. And if we allow this solar eclipse, Scorpio, to come into your life, and you can look at situations in that sense, what is the end game, and how can all of us involved in that end game work in the best way towards it? So that can be applied to literally your own business, if you have an own business, whether you're working with a group, whether you've got lots of friends or people involved in a kind of cause. That's the spirit you need. And that's what this solar eclipse will bring into the arena. I think also it's interesting, as you can see from this eclipse, we've got harmony between the sun and Pluto, your ruler, harmony between the sun and Uranus. And when we look at that, we see the potential for good things to come out of difficulties and effort. And I want to leave you with that thought. Sagittarius. For you, this particular solar eclipse is happening in the 10th house of life direction. It's the area of career. And when we think about, well, not everybody has a career, not everybody has a job, but everybody in the world has some kind of sense of where they're heading, where they want to go. And in fact, this is why this is so important to understand in a natal chart, that we think about the ascendant being who we are, how we greet the world. It's very personal. But there's also a whole dimension of ourselves, which is about, who do I want to be? You know, and that when we think about that, we say that to children. We say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say something like, oh, I want to be a doctor, you know, I want to be a builder, you know, oh, an airplane pilot. And so that's why the 10th house is so important, because it is the area in which we have our visions and our hopes of who we want to be. Now, maybe that you are living your best life and you are doing what you feel you were born to do or what you enjoy doing, in which case this solar eclipse isn't so much about deep dissatisfaction and feeling disappointed with where you are in life. It may have more to do with the changing circumstances of your life, which means that you can't be, it can't be the same as it once was. Things have to change, and maybe they're changing, you know, by other people or by circumstance and events. They're not of your own making. And I think we see that very much in the sense that this solar eclipse is opposed to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is so much about this as a force of destiny, if you like, pushing events and creating impasses and developments over which you appear to have no control. But of course, you do have choice once these events have happened. So whether Sagittarius, you've reached a point yourself where you're saying, you know, I'm done with this career, I'm done with this job, or I'm done with this situation that people see me in, because this is your place in the world. And you want to change things, and you have the power to change it when you look at the way that solar eclipse is set up with Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. You see the power that actually you have in the choices that you make, or whether events do the job for you. A decision is made, whether it's to do with finances, whether it's to do with jobs and economy, or whether it's to do with who you live with. Remember, we've got Uranus in the 7th house there. It's joined up to that new moon, solar eclipse. And so there could be changes in a relationship, whether new people are coming into your life, a new relationship, or whether it's the reverse and it's over. Your established relationship is over, and it's certainly going to change your position in the world. But remember, it's a power degree, 29 of a sign. And while we may feel that events are leading us, the real truth of it is to acquire the power of choice. We express our power by the choices we make. And I think if you remember that, you're going to come through this period successfully. Okay, Sagittarius? Capricorn. The solar eclipse, if you look at it, is happening in the 9th house. And I always say this every time I come to somebody to a sign where the ninth house is the focus. I say, this is my favorite house. I love the ninth house. This is where we travel. This is where we go the distance. And that's a phrase that we use when we push the boat out. Well, all these things are sort of metaphors. The idea of, yes, on the one hand, quite literally, there may be journeys and people who live in distant parts, they may be all part of this eclipse, different countries, different states, people who are far away from you are part of your eclipse story. It may be travel itself. Maybe this is the moment you make a decision to take a very long journey. Or maybe you are invited to go somewhere you've never been to before. And this all comes out of this solar eclipse. But it's not just about travel, the ninth house. It's really about traveling with the mind so that you explore things you didn't know. And there are new things to learn. The solar eclipse is about a new chapter. It's new things. So you may be embarking on a journey in knowledge. You may be starting a course. You may be at university for the first time. There are all sorts of ways we would look at this. And it's also one's experience of life, that if one looks at one's life as a journey and therefore takes the experiences that are big and powerful in life, and we see them as something that shapes our lives and shapes ourselves, we can see that this solar eclipse has a lot to say about the way your life is shaping up right now and the way you are shaping up in accordance with the things that are happening to you. Saturn is your ruling planet, and you often do very well on Saturn transits. So I do really think there are a lot of Capricorns out there who are actually going to do very well around the time of this eclipse. So new things coming to you, the new things that you are beginning, you definitely have a feeling that you're on par with your destiny, and that you're already beginning to feel, yes, I'm doing the right thing. What's happening is the right thing. It's to my benefit. I'm going to grow through it. My life is going to expand through it. And I'm already feeling very, very positive about it. So you Capricorns listening to me at this point, or those of you with Capricorn rising, might be nodding your heads and saying, absolutely right, spot on. But there are going to be some Capricorns or some Capricorn rising who think, oh, I'm in a really difficult spot. I'm not getting the answers I need. I seem to be stuck, and I don't know where I'm going. Of course, that's the influence of that Neptune opposing that solar eclipse. You don't know where you're going. You don't know why you're going there, and you feel you've got no answers and no direction. That's hard for Capricorn, because you like to have strategies. You like to be in charge. So in a situation where you're not in charge, that's a pretty difficult place for Capricorn. But that's a learning curve as well. I had one of my most important lessons of my life when I was in a hospital bed for 6 weeks, not allowed to pick anything up from the floor, move, anything. I was, just in my bed, and I had no power. I was lying flat on my back. And I learned, in a way, how to have dignity when power has been taken away from you. And so there is something about this matrix that we've got here in the chart that is saying that you might have to learn how to have your power, retain your power, even though you're in a powerless situation. So think about that, Capricorn. I think I've really got something here that you would find very useful. And yes, I like this configuration that we've got here. It's also saying, you can't go on doing the same thing all the time. Things have to change. And the sooner you embrace new things, new ideas, new possibilities, you get behind it, then accordingly, your life will change for the better. Aquarius. As you can see here, this solar eclipse is taking place in the 8th house of the horoscope, a very mysterious area. all the water houses are complex, but I think, you know, the eighth house, we think about death and rebirth in this house. And, you know, that's a really heavy concept, isn't it? But I think we get a little bit nearer the understanding of the eighth house when we see it as what we receive, and in particular what we receive from other people. So it has a lot to do with relationships. And when we get into a relationship, whether it's a business relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a marriage, then there should be a lot of giving and receiving on both sides. So when we look at a solar eclipse in the eighth house, we might be looking at two things. Either this is an opportunity for someone with whom you're in a relationship, a business relationship, a financial relationship, a romantic relationship, and seeing what they have to offer you. So there may be some surprise amount of money coming to you from an organization or an individual. Remember, eclipses are rather fateful things. So what happens around the time of an eclipse, or what is connected to that eclipse, is about other people's money coming to you, or when you are striking up a relationship that has money as part of the relationship, it's about the balance of that, how much you get out of it, but at the same time, how much you have to give that other person. This is why the eighth house has a lot to do with settlements, whether you're coming out of a job or whether you're coming out of a marriage or a business partnership. It's about divvying up the spoils fairly. But this house also has to do with intimacy. And when you think about it, we are naked in the eighth house. We are naked financially, and we can be naked when it comes to exposing ourselves and being intimate with another person. So could this solar eclipse indicate the beginning of a new intimate relationship? It may do indeed. And if it is, then look at how that solar eclipse is connected to Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, saying this is going to be life-changing. That matrix that we're looking at is a life-changing matrix, every bit as much as money coming to you in a legacy or as a settlement could be a life-changing amount of money. Now, before you run away with the idea and stop listening to me and thinking, oh, I'm coming to money, that's great, everything's going to be perfect. Remember, what goes up can come down, and the reverse can be the case, and you may end up having to give money that you weren't expecting, whether it's because of some expenditure in your life that is you know, you've got to stump up, or whether it is to do with a relationship, it is to do with a business relationship, and that actually it's you who are actually going to have to give of your income to that other person. This solar eclipse, Aquarius, happening in this area is all about exposure. And as an air sign, you're good with ideas and you're good with communication. You think things through well, and you're very easy and approachable in many ways. But your emotional life is very complex. And you don't like having your emotions really, getting down deep and dark into emotional territory is difficult for Aquarius. And that's really where you're being dragged when we look at this complex configuration. And maybe this idea of transformation, which is inherent in Pluto in your sign, being linked to that solar eclipse, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, is saying, a difficult emotional experience, letting it go, being intimate, exposing who you truly are at the center of yourself, is the transformation that Pluto offers, and also the eclipse being part of the mechanism that allows that to happen. Complicated, I know, but then the 8th house is complicated, Aquarius. Pisces. Well, you have been in the center of an eclipse storm, really, since the end of February, because we had the first total lunar eclipse of the cycle in March. There was a solar eclipse, but that fell in Aries. And a couple of weeks ago, 7th of September, there was a lunar eclipse, total lunar eclipse in your sign. So maybe you're watching me and thinking, oh, if you only had time, I would be telling you this amazing story about what's been happening to me. Certainly, if you're born towards the end of your sign, Pisces, you've got a March 18th, 19th, 20th, even 21st of March birthday, then you're right in the sights of this solar eclipse. It's going to be opposing your birthday sun. And of course, if you've got any other planets or points at 29 degrees of Virgo, Pisces, Sagittarius, or Gemini. So I think this is, it's an interesting one, particularly for relationships. And a solar eclipse in the 7th house, which this is technically, does suggest a new relationship or the beginning of a new stage of an existing relationship. Now, a relationship that starts around this time with 2 eclipses affecting your sign is obviously a very, very destined relationship. The person that you're with, they're going to impact your life in a big way. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to marry them or you'll start a business with them or they're going to be a lifelong person. They may be, but it's really the effect they have on your life because they're going to open a new chapter or help you open a new chapter. You might do that together, but really and truly, this is about you. And it is about what this person offers you in the way of shedding a skin. Remember, Pluto is involved in this solar eclipse, as is Uranus. So we've got a surprise element to it. We've also got this idea of the end of old regimes, the beginning of new ones. Wow, this is massive. And a person is intimately linked with this process. And even if that person doesn't stay in your life for very long, that person could change your life completely. And again, I remember from my own life experience that the shortest relationship in my life turned out to have the most impact on it and changed me and changed my life. So I don't want you to get caught up in the idea that if you've just met someone, this is going to be a life partner. Yes, it could be, but also remember the more important thing is the effect this person is going to have on your life, how they will change you because of their presence in your life. Now, the fact that the solar eclipse is opposing the Saturn-Neptune conjunction also shows me very, very clearly that, and of course it depends, you know, how old you are, because if you're 20 years old and you're living, you know, you've lived 20 years, there are going to be lots of chapters in your life, lots of endings, lots of new beginnings. And so you can hardly say a whole chapter is over because you're so young. But in a way, round about 20, 19, 20, 21, 22, these are really growing into adulthood years, going to university, maybe starting out earning a living for the first time. So you are shedding your home, your childhood, and your background. So it's applicable at any age, but you need to be, you know, flexible with your interpretation. If you're 60 years old and you've got this solar eclipse and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction opposing it, then this is going to be a time when you may move from where you've lived for a very long time. You may end a marriage. You may end where you've employed. The end of a regime needs to be looked at flexibly because it's in there, but it's going to be different from person to person. But let's focus on that new moon. Let's focus on the idea of someone bringing you the story of this eclipse, someone coming into your life or someone's actions having an impact on your life and where you go from here. Aries, have a look at that solar eclipse. And it's so near the 7th house cusp, isn't it? It's almost entering the sign of Libra, but it is technically in the 6th house. And what is the 6th house of the horoscope? It is the engine of the horoscope, or the engine of life. This is where things keep churning and getting us through the day, the month, the year. It's the shape and texture of our lives, how things run. It's our responsibilities that we have to go to work, to earn money, the responsibilities we have to our health, to be healthy. It's the responsibilities we have to other people who depend on us, and the duties we perform for other people. So the 6th house is a hugely important area. Now we could look at that solar eclipse and say, guess what? A new job is coming in. A new regime is going to happen because of that job. Or it could be that your workplace is changing. Maybe there's lots of construction going on and you're going to have a different office or a different way of working. Maybe you work outside. Well, this is all changing. Or maybe you are living in a country where there are lots of changes going on in companies, so that what you used to do is not what you're going to be doing from now on. So there's changes in your work life. If you don't have a job and you've never had a job, or it's not important, or you've reached retirement age, there is still a sense of how you fill the 24 hours. And often, we think, especially when we're getting a little older, we think, oh, retirement, how great that will be. I don't have to go to work anymore. And the thing is that when we don't have work shaping our daily routine, we get sloppy. And suddenly our life doesn't have the same purpose and shape that it used to have. So this solar eclipse is almost like a call to arms to those of you who may think, those Arians who may think, well, I've earned my rest. I've worked all my life. And what it's saying here is that doesn't mean you shouldn't have something that you do, that there shouldn't be responsibilities, that there shouldn't be things that give your life purpose, shape, and texture. Because once you get that, then things run better. Your health system runs better. Is this solar eclipse about your health? Is it a sign of a new season for health matters? So new regimes that are going to help you feel better and fitter? Or is it to do with the fact that there is a problem you need to be aware of and that needs fixing? Will this solar eclipse expose that? This area of the horoscope, of course, is a very, we talk about purpose and we think then about our life purpose. And by and large, when you ask people about, what is their life purpose, and you're usually going to ask this when they're at an age where they can consider it in the context of what they've done and what they're now doing. And often you will hear people say, my purpose is to help others, is to, my purpose is whatever I do, it's going to be for the use and the benefit of others. And that's the secret of the 6th house as well. It's a very spiritual house in the sense that we do the work of spirit often in the everyday things. And we're taught this by that term savor. In other words, this is what you do as a daily practice that may be very mundane, nothing very special. But it's the work of the spirit. We're on our spiritual path as we do very mundane tasks selflessly and without expectation of rewards. So if you're listening to me and you feel very spiritually awoken because Neptune is now in Aries, then you still need to think about the work of spirit. The path that you do is often very humdrum. It's in the everyday work. That's the way your spiritual life grows. Also thinking about that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, especially if you're an early Aries, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd even of March, then life might be a little bit muddled at this time. Maybe you're not feeling on top of things. Maybe you feel things have got on top of you because of Saturn being so close to Neptune. It will pass. And what I think needs to happen is that you need to have patience. And Aries are born without the patience gene, really. Everything needs to happen as soon as it possibly can. So you're being taught about patience. You're being taught that you can stand still, you can allow things to unfold before you jump in there and try to change them. And I think that's the real lesson of this solar eclipse opposition, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. This is not the time to jump in. It's the time to allow things to reveal themselves and for you to make decisions based on a greater awareness of a situation. I hope that helps, Aries. And as you know, Aries, I'm talking to myself here. I need patience. Okay, Taurus. Taurus, this solar eclipse for you is happening in the 5th house. The creative 5th house has a lot to do with our heart. And in the sense, really, of the things that make us feel heart happy, affairs of the heart, and sometimes, yes, the physical heart as well. It's an area where we make our heart beat more soundly, whether it's through exercise and sport and entertainment, whether it's through love, or whether it's simply through doing the things that make us feel very creative and very full of ideas and possibilities. It's also about our children. It's about pregnancy, and it's about grandchildren. So this solar eclipse may play a part in that. It may say, guess what? There's going to be a new addition in the family. Or maybe you know about that new addition and a birth is around the corner. And the solar eclipse is showing you that this baby, this new addition to the family, is very, very special indeed. And I often say that it's an individual who brings the story of the eclipse, the purpose of the eclipse, the message of the eclipse to you. So how about this, that there is a small, tiny little piece of humanity who is the bearer of the message of this eclipse to you and may indeed change your life. And things to do with pregnancy and birth, the solar eclipse may play a part in that, however it plays a part in there. And I'm not going to get involved in perhaps the negatives of it because I just don't choose to do that. But obviously, a solar eclipse is an announcement of some description to do with the bearing of children. But creativity doesn't have to be procreativity. It can be the creative endeavors we have. And if we are writers and artists and musicians and dancers, then we are very 5th house people. We perform, we create. And so that solar eclipse in that context could be fame. It could be suddenly getting something that you become acknowledged for your skills, for your abilities. It could be a new creative endeavor. It could even be a new business or a new opportunity. But whatever it is, it's life-changing because of the way that solar eclipse is caught up with Uranus, Pluto, Saturn and Neptune. In fact, Pluto in the 10th house, Uranus in the 2nd house. These are the material areas of the chart. So whatever happens with the idea of a new creative venture, then it's going to affect your career and your standing in the world. And it's also going to change your financial situation. Whether it's a good or bad thing, that we don't know. We just know that these areas of life are being brought into the story of the eclipse. But the sun and moon are also opposed to Saturn and Neptune. There's a sacrifice here. What do you have to give up in order for this to all come about? Surely something. Even when we think of fame and we think about a reward for our skills and our creativity, it can come with a cost. We lose our privacy. We lose the free time we used to have. So bear that in mind, Taurus. Nothing is for nothing. You're going to pay a price. There is a cost. And I don't want to get necessarily into this with the idea of babies and children, but this idea that maybe even your own progeny come at a cost, maybe it's because of their lives that you will be asked to produce something, whether it's financially back them or whether it's in some other way that you're being called upon to do something for the benefit in the life of your progeny. That could also be in this configuration, this matrix. But last word on this, and there are so many Taurians out there, it's very general, isn't it? But I would say, especially if you've got anything at 29 degrees of the signs, therefore this is going to connect with your chart very intimately, that this could be the opening of a very new and important chapter of life. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. Gemini, for you, the solar eclipse is taking place in the all-important 4th house of the horoscope. That is the area of home and family. It's the roots of life. It is the foundations of the future. How powerful is that? Like all the cardinal houses, that's the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th. These are the doing houses, the active houses. This is where things really galvanize, get themselves together, and they're the important struts of one's life. If you think about the scaffolding upon which your life is built, then the 4th house is one of the important structures. So a solar eclipse here says, hey, something new is happening. A new chapter is opening. If we just look at a very basic meaning of a new moon in the 4th house, it's a new home. Now, is it a new home because you're moving and you're going to a new home? Or is it that you're remaking your home and it's going to be new once the decorators have gone? It's probably a little bit more important than that. Does it mean there's a new addition to the family? So that you've got a new member of the family coming in, whether by birth or marriage. But it's a little bit more, it's bigger than those things, even though those things in and of themselves are pretty important in terms of your life story. We're also looking at, where you've come from. So we're looking at the way you've evolved over the years and in your tree of life, so to speak, your expectations of where you're going in life, who you want to be in the future. So it's a point of assessment, really, and having a look at your hopes, your dreams, your ambitions, your desires, the way your life is at this point. Is it a true reflection of who you are and who you wanted to be? And if the answer is no, then you need to know that a new start needs to be made. And whether that comes about by force of circumstance, by the force of the universe, if you like, or whether you yourself say, I'm done with all this. I'm going to have to make big changes on my own terms in order to be where I want to be in life and to be who I always thought I was going to be. Now, Uranus is in the very early degrees of Gemini. So if you have a May birthday, you're already feeling the effects of that Uranus, which is about sudden change and sudden opportunities or things just happening that you really have no control over. But tied into this solar eclipse, as it is, it's trining Uranus, it's trining Pluto, then you get this feeling that whatever's happening is about you personally as well. Yes, it's a time of growth, it's a time of change, but it's also a period when you may realize that you're not always in charge of your own destiny, even if you want to be. There are other circumstances, other fateful circumstances in life that come into play. When we look at the solar eclipse opposing Neptune and Saturn, we think of end of regimes. Back we come again to the idea of the end of a job. Maybe it's retirement, or maybe it's the end of working life because you're starting a family or you have a new baby. There are so many ways you could look at this. But a lot of what happens at this time is also a reflection of what's going on in the world. We're not isolated from what's going on. And I'm taking a bit of a stab in the dark here, Gemini, but I know I'm speaking to some of you in that I think the desire to do something, to be the change in the world that the world needs, may mean a sense of uprooting your life in some way and doing something radical in order to follow that impulse. And I'm not saying every single Gemini or every single person with Gemini rising is going to have a resounding yes to that. But I do think that some of you very definitely will do. It's almost as though it's not like your moment has come. It's almost like everything has come together at this point, and you think, this is it. Things have got to change, and I'm going to be the change that I want to be in the world. It's bigger than just you. So there's big stuff here, Gemini, isn't there? And I'm sure a lot of you might be baffled if that hasn't resonated with you. But I think to some Geminis, it's as big as that. Oh, and when I think about it, of course, Mr. Trump is a Gemini. So, this change of life at this point is probably spot on. Anyway, let's get on to my final two signs, Cancer. Cancer, this solar eclipse, and of course you're ruled by the moon. So eclipses play a very, very important part in your life. And if you are born on an eclipse, as I was talking about King Charles, talking about Donald Trump, these are eclipse babies, then when there are eclipses, you respond to them more than other people would. And it may also be that the events that are connected to an eclipse make more of an impact on you if you happen to have been born on an eclipse. But even if you're not an eclipse baby, this solar eclipse, coming as it does, on the very, very edge of Libra, and we look at that third, fourth house part of the chart, and Neptune being in the 10th house, Saturn close to it, especially if you are a June Cancerian, then this is an all-important period for you. It may be a period of great achievement, things happening to you, and I think I described this earlier, the idea of a dream come true, of things, the stars aligning to bring something into being that's absolutely amazing. But so too we can have the opposite. And what's happening at this time is that things are really happening that are not in your control. And you're feeling in a way that this is not a good set of circumstances. It is really quite difficult. You hadn't planned for it, and it's happening. Now, one of the things about this Neptune-Saturn conjunction is that when it's connected as it is with this solar eclipse, is it has to do with sacrifice as well. So what's being asked of you at this time is to give up something. Now, you may not be immediately aware of that. You may think to yourself, well, no, I can't see my life as any different. What am I being asked to give up? But in the near future, you'll think on these words and think, I recognize that I can't have what I want. I can't be who I want to be without giving something up. There's something, or the cost of something. It's going to be a cost in there, maybe quite literally, it's going to cost money. We've also got this idea of the end of regimes. And of course, with the solar eclipse being a new chapter, we've got this idea that there must be endings as well. Again, we're looking at things to do with a way of life. And maybe in there is a sense of, I had this dream, I had this ambition, and you know what? It's not appropriate to the who I am now, or to the things that are happening that make me see my life and my priorities differently. In fact, if we stay true to the idea of this solar eclipse in the 3rd house, this has a lot to do with your outlook, your view of the world, the view of your small world, and the view of how the world works. And I think a lot of things are changing in that world view for you at this time. And tied into this, if you're listening to me and you're thinking there's something that is happening at this time, but you haven't mentioned it yet, there's this idea of knowledge, this idea of learning. And the solar eclipse, technically in the 3rd house of knowledge, of communication, of movement, may involve the embarking on a new course, and also the embarking on a journey in knowledge and experience, or maybe even a physical journey. But whatever it is, when it's got the eclipse stamp on it, you'll know that it is mega important. Coming back to this idea of outlook, how we look at situations, the way we look at the world is the way the world looks back at us. So this solar eclipse offers you an opportunity to rethink your views and your perspective on things. And once you do that, everything can change. Leo. So this solar eclipse takes place in the 2nd house of your solar chart. We're nearly in the 3rd house, but let's remain true to the borderline. You can neither be, I think I said earlier, this idea, you can't be both a Pisces and an Aries. You can't be both a Leo and a Virgo. You're one thing or the other. And so it is with an eclipse. There's a reason this eclipse is at 29 degrees of Virgo and not 0 degrees of Libra. So the 2nd house is involved, and the 2nd house is about self-worth. And that's a big number, really, because when we think about self-worth, it's not just, how much money we earn, how many assets we have, what valuables we own, what property we own. It's really about ourselves, because ultimately all we have is ourselves. And so it is important to have a sense of value in ourselves. And so often we get, our confidence is lost, and it's because other people perhaps don't treat us as though they value us. And when that happens, it's very difficult to go out there and slay dragons. So when we think about this solar eclipse, it's about reasserting your self-worth. Now, it may have all these other layers of meaning. You may make more money. This may be an indication of a new job, more income, a new way of working with money, new investments even. But it's also about perhaps a new way of looking at your own value. And again, I come back to that idea of, if other people are telling us how wonderful we are, we feel full of value. And when people are grateful for what we do, it beams back on us and we feel great to be alive. But when people don't acknowledge us, and when the things that we do are devalued, it is really very difficult to feel that sense of, self-confidence. It's hard. But occasionally we need to remember who we are and what we offer, and to be very convinced of our own offerings. And when we have a strong sense that what we do is of value, regardless of how other people treat us, then a magical effect occurs and we start getting treated better because we have a sense or a strong sense of value in ourselves. We are not our money. It doesn't matter how much money you've got in the bank or what you don't have. It's not a reflection on you. I mean, yes, it's good to have money because we can keep a roof over our heads. But, you know, it isn't a statement about us. And we need to separate that out very, very clearly. And I think once we've done that, that's also a way that we can start to enjoy life better, to feel happy about who we are and the confidence to do the things we want to do, because we're confident in ourselves. And it isn't about what we have, it is about us. I think this is the biggest message of that solar eclipse. But yes, as I said a moment ago, it could be an indication of a new job, new income, a new business. You may be starting your own enterprise. You may be going into something all on your own or with partnership with someone. And so this is a new venture. And because it's an eclipse, it means the effects of this are going to be massive on the rest of your life. And if things happen at this particular time, Leo, and they can be small things, but yet you have a feeling this could grow, this could be important, you're probably right. Sometimes it's only when we've gone, you know, months, even years, and we look back on a period of time, we realize how significant it was. Yet at the time, it seemed like nothing. I mean, again, I look back on my life and think about the things I did on the spur of the moment that I thought, that's what I have to do. And I had absolutely no idea of the consequences of that action. I'm not going to get into it now, it's not the time, but that's the sort of thing that an eclipse does in a way. What it marks those actions that you take and the things that happen around the time that may seem like not terribly important do turn out to be excessively important. Now, if we look at how this solar eclipse is attached to Pluto in the 7th house, we know that there's another person involved in the eclipse story. This may have to do with a relationship. It may have to do with a new relationship coming in or a change in an established relationship. And this could be, in some cases, the end of a relationship. And of course, that changes your income and how you deal with money. So that may be part of this story. We've also got the sun opposing Saturn and Neptune. And that is about recognizing limitations and realizing when we need to push back, when we need to accept the limitations of a situation, and when we need to say, no, I'm going to continue to follow my dream, to follow my muse. That's the essence of this Neptune-Saturn dialogue. It's the difference between what seems as though there should be a line drawn between what you're getting involved with or what you're doing and what in some ways is calling you to do something or to have something that you have a kind of vision about. And the balance between those two is the challenge, really. And we look at this solar eclipse taking place on the 21st of September. So we know around this time, there are going to be events that are going to play into that dilemma with holding back or going forward, following your dream or doing something which appears to be sensible, not going beyond your limits. And ultimately, only you can make that decision. That's not for me looking at this general pattern and saying what's the right thing to do. You've got to be true to yourself, and which brings us right back to the idea of the solar eclipse in the 2nd house, which has to do with feeling full of value in yourself. Okay, Leo, well, that brings us right through to the end of the zodiac, and you can probably hear in my voice that that's been quite a journey for your astrology here. But there's no getting away from it. Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, they are really, really important moments. And hopefully going through this sign by sign, I've given you a sort of angle that you can work on. It's resonated with you and will prove to be sort of helpful as you go through this particular period. Going back and thinking again about the first part of this video, when I talked about, you know, changes in leadership, in changes in administration, the end of regimes, that's really going to play into the story of this second quarter. It's the fourth quarter of the year, because of its proximity, this solar eclipse, to the Ingress chart, to the Libra Ingress chart. So I've given you a lot to think about, and I look forward to being here again on my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.